Everyone, we'll kick off with engineering office hours in just a few minutes.
Now recording.
Okay, welcome everybody. Engineering office hours here. If that's the channel you tuned in for, you're in the right place. And we wanted to kick things off today, or I should say I wanted to kick things off today by just having a Q&A session about Conscience, his proposal for Taxi Stake to run an Unchained instance that ultimately would be we're hoping there's many people who run Unchained, but this would be kind of the certified DAO recommended one to start. And the web v2 front end would point to this instance of Unchained, not one that's run by ShapeShift AG. ShapeShiftDAO can't run one because ShapeShiftDAO does not own any compute resources. So yeah, I wanted to just have a quick chat about that, see if there's any questions from engineering. I mean, I haven't really talked to anybody about it yet, so I particularly would like the opinion of Kevin, who is our primary senior engineer on Unchained, and Adam, who works a lot in Unchained as well. If there's any gotchas or anything, are you willing to able to help support Taxi Stake, get that up and running? Just kind of a general conversation like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm planning to run my own as well. Glad that we're taking initiative, and yeah, the more the merrier. And we could potentially, in this early stage, like before Fox Chain and all that comes to fruition, let end users choose who they're using for a backend, or maybe we just hide that and do like a prefer, pick a random one. If it's not available, use the next one type thing.
So I just want to reiterate a point I made in the forum, which is that the Unchained node it does have to be trusted at this point. And it can lie to you about whether a transaction is completed or what your balance is, or potentially in the future, like what smart contract addresses to send things to, or like what the Asgard vault is or so forth. I'm comfortable with, Taxi Stake because I literally know those guys, but selecting a random one for a list, it's just not very scalable to manually manage a list that's very long, I guess. I think it would be nice to have a knob for users to change the thing, but there should be some messaging there that conveys to the user that they are placing a degree of trust in who they're using as the node.
So in this early stage, we're not going to be running V2 front end with a back end that is not trusted. And then once we have Fox Chain in play, there will be some manner of consensus-y kind of thing, I believe, at least in the ways that Perklin has described it, that will disincentivize or make obsolete the fudging of numbers, as the case may be. So just also reiterating on the point that Reed made, though I find the perspective valuable, like you were just kind of pointing out the obvious here. This is not meant to be a perfect, final, ultimate solution. It's meant to be an iterative step in the right direction toward DAO independence. So to that end, we need to leverage these trusted relationships for now.
And I agree, and I think it's a good proposal.
I would also say that I actually don't think we should have like a drop or selectee thing for people to choose at this point. It should just be, right now in these early days, the app uses the backend that we trust until such time that we can implement Foxchain and do that whole distributed awesome sauce.
Is that clear in the proposal?
The thing is sorry, I don't know anything about the proposal, but the thing is, that it's open source. So if we don't need a drop down, because if someone wants to use a different backend, they can just host it, right? Like, I don't think there's a big issue there.
Is what in the proposals in specific, Josh?
That we're gonna stand up this instance of Unchained on Taxi Stake and then point the Web v2 repo, at least that is we will be hosting or soon be pushing out to IPFS, that will point to the Taxi Stake Unchained instance. That's clear in the proposal, right?
Maybe not as clear as it could be, and I can totally work on that.
Yeah, okay, because you still have one more iteration to go before, right? I think you're soon, before the governance call tomorrow, you're going to be putting up the official proposal, right?
Yeah, well, I was going to wait until after the governance call tomorrow to actually put the proposal up for vote.
Okay, cool. No worries.
But yeah, I will add this. I will add a note to make sure to add the fact that we intend to use the Taxi Stake instance as the primary for V2.
So I would just throw out there, it might be beneficial to have multiple backends from the beginning, because that's where we're headed in the end, and it would prevent like making mistakes that couple us to a single backend that we have to go and fix later. And the backends will be able to run like the chain or chains of their choosing versus a single, or versus like if you're going to run it, you have to run it all.
Yeah, I mean,
so I just want it'll like force our code to be aware of that stuff and be written in a way that is aware of multiple backends, different hosting, and things like that.
Yeah, so I don't think we even have the option of doing a multiple backend situation without lots of code changes. This is just meant to be like a quick and easy. We can get to this place where we make a meaningful, very meaningful and profound modification to the way that technical operations are handled inside the DAO. We can do that now without inflicting a great deal of change on V2 or a great deal of disruption for the engineering workstream, other than a string and a config file somewhere that points at the different instance.
At a slightly broader level.
I mean, even today, we have different instances for ETH and Bitcoin, technically.
For a little, all the stuff is loaded via environment variables and it's baked into all the files. That's what I'm trying to say. So we should move away from that.
Yep.
I would love to move away from that to make builds more deterministic. I'm fighting Webpack hashing algorithms right now, but that's sort of the next issue.
So are they planning to, will we be switching over CI to just deploy to their stuff? Or are they going to manually do this? Will we have a dev cluster to look at? What do we do in terms of support and debugging if they're running it on their own cluster and we don't have visibility, and all of those kind of aspects to this change?
Interesting questions. I think for the short term, at least as long as the foundation exists, we could continue to leverage those AWS accounts as sort of the dev environment. And then once things are hammered out and ready to go for deployment, then Taxi Stake would pull code and deploy it either manually, or if they have their own CI process, then they could do that.
So to reiterate, that would be us still running dev environments for those purposes of just pushing automatically to our own, and they would just be solely for public instances that would be on actual like version releases, if you will.
Yeah, although technically they could also run the dev stuff. They could also host and run the dev stuff if we wanted to expand the agreement to include that. Right now, it just includes the one thing for the production thing, so we can get, infrastructure building under the guise of the DAO and not under the guise of legacy ShapeShift AG.
And then would we be able to get access to have visibility into those clusters if we are to be the ones managing
Yeah.
still uptime and needing
Yeah.
to deal with alerts?
We would probably need Marley here to answer that ultimately, but I don't see why not.
And then there's the situation, like Kevin right now is in the middle of rolling out changes to both the front end and Unchained, right? And they're kind of coordinated. So we would need I think we need a conversation with Marley or Taxi Stake to make sure that the expectations are clear. Like, what will his availability be to push out new updates and things like that?
Sure. And maybe it's a case for having fully automated CI and presenters to that effect.
Well, I think
Yeah,
there's
that's
also
what should be. He shouldn't have to
Yeah.
do it. It should be because we merged master. But we are still going to get in support cases, from time to time where insight to that infrastructure is going to be necessary.
Yeah, and it would ultimately, like, the people who run the backends should be the ones who support it in their environment, right? And then they reach out to the work stream for help when they can't troubleshoot an issue. So that's a good
because we have incentives then.
I think there is a big, issue here that we need to look at is, right. We're used to with our old code base, tightly coupling the back end and the front end. And I think, moving forward, as we expect people to run different backends, we need to expect that people won't always be up to date on the latest version. And I think we need to have a better plan for, backwards compatibility and, not breaking things and, having like an API documentation, that's, separate, some kind of contract to get set. So that we don't have to run into these issues of, oh, well, you have to deploy this Unchained change or like the front end will explode. And to 100%. Adam's point, and to Adam's point, I think that, the idea there is that we want the front end code to be more robust, right? To be able to handle, oh, well, this chain isn't available or anything like that. So somehow we need to build up a strategy to kind of, I don't want to say completely decouple because I don't think that's the right word, but to make the front end a little bit more robust in handling, what kind of data it gets from the back end and all of those things.
Yep. That's another reason to have the front end be aware of more than one host out of the gate. Like you can have a default and always use one, but we should get used to that, like error handling. What's my next option? This thing's not working. Automation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, you could do something like, oh, well, you stand up a local Unchained that only has Bitcoin or something, right? And like the front end should still work with that, even if you pointed at a back end that has more chains, it does more stuff. So whether or not that means they can do a drop down versus an environment variable, I think is a different question than making the front end more robust in its handling of it talking to the back end.
Seems like this particular part of the conversation is drifting in scope a little bit from the proposal.
Sorry about that. Well,
it certainly is.
Part
it's good conversation, though.
But I agree. I just, I wrote this proposal to be very tightly focused in scope, and I want the conversation about it to be very tightly focused in scope too, so that it's very specific about what it is we're trying to accomplish here.
In my defense, I haven't read it, so maybe I should do that before I open my mouth. So I'll just shut up until I read it.
The actual deployment
we should have a public reading.
Seems reasonable. Like it was set up in a way to do that. We've got the whole cluster launcher thing that's been vetted by middle name, deployed to different AWS instances. So like the actual running of the thing should be straightforward and simple. Yeah, my questions would revolve around just making sure that for now, with it being kind of like a central backend and we're just shifting who owns that we still have visibility into like alerting. There's all the effort that middle names put into like the ops genie alerting, like that'll still have to be running in that cluster so it can alert us in some sense until we have like a better, more decentralized way to like query backends and do health checking that way and like not list them or whatever that world looks like. But until
Yeah.
that point, yeah, those would be the concerns: visibility, alerting, and just having, you know, a little bit more of direct access, as long as it still is the centralized backend, to not be a blocker because we're switching over, or it'll at least show the pain points of what this will start looking like, which I think will be good things to come across earlier on and
I
start
agree.
addressing.
I noticed Marley
that
showed up.
fit.
Marley, do you have any input on? There were some questions about whether engineers who would help support this deployment would have remote access to this cluster that would be hosted in your infrastructure, presumably via AWS API keys, and then also what the expectation was as far as, you know, right now there's some tight coupling between the front end, back end, certain versions of the front end requiring certain versions of the back end. Your availability as far as troubleshooting, triage, and coordinated CI deployments are concerned.
Yeah, I showed up late, so I'm not sure what I missed, but yeah, I think I was, when we were originally talking about this, I was a little hesitant about a bunch of extra on call or something like that. I've got Taxi Stick has a lot going on right now, and so what I was offering was essentially a isolated AWS account for the work stream to use for a backend service, and then that is paid via the Sailor stream we discussed, which is still, I think, open to something else. I would love to understand what's going on and be able to quickly rebuild it and destroy it myself. But it's definitely, I would think that it's like Conscience's baby, and like, I guess we need to talk expectations. So I don't know either. Sorry.
Do I understand there, Marley? It sounds like what you or maybe were thinking this would be, or what your expectation was, is that you would basically provide the AWS instance, you would pay the bill of the AWS instance, and that's kind of it until you actually learned more about it. But you weren't planning to really deploy or provide support for that instance, but you would give full access to the engineering work stream and Conscious to do so. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I had in mind, and like need to go check the form again. Like, essentially, it's taken me a lot of effort to get to where I'm at now, where I Taxi Stick can set up these business relationships with like AWS and then pay the bill with a credit card, and still be able to process USDC into the business and stuff like that. So I'm at a place where I can start helping. I would like to help with getting the infrastructure stood up and an ability for the workstream to have infrastructure. I don't know. I would love to work with Conscious to build it out, but my understanding of how to build it from scratch would be not there yet.
Yeah, there would not be.
Yeah, that's
from scratch. We have tools and IAC and all that kind of stuff set up so that all you have to do is. And anyway, there's a deploy pattern for everything. Once you have prerequisites in there.
and I see this as a potential positive because it forces us to make it fucking easy to run.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is
I'm almost
one of our top goals here.
Yeah.
As far as,
and what's super interesting that I said to Adam a couple times is like the Tendermint stuff. I have a strong need to run automated Tendermint nodes. And I would, if we had Cosmos done, I could start pumping out Osmosis and stuff, most likely. Siri is listening to. Because I need those for the validator full nodes need like dedicated full nodes. So.
Okay, so it basically sounds like we would get API keys from you and plug those into our CI flows to deploy Unchained to your shit, basically.
So can I just ask the
Put it down
question
there.
of if it's literally just hosting this in a different room, and instead of us paying AWS directly, it's us paying Taxi Stake to pay AWS directly, and it's only one instance, what really we're actually doing? Or should we like be actually running 2 instances? Or I feel like it's just kind of just rejiggering how, like, what account essentially, and
Yeah,
we'll end up
it
doing
kind of
the same
is
thing in
basically
the end.
because the ShapeShift AG is going away. ShapeShift, all these accounts that it's currently running in are going away. So we need to find
Oh,
another
okay.
room to run the shit in.
That's
So yeah,
the
that's a
key.
good stepping
Okay.
back. My
Subtext.
understanding is to as a first place to offset until something like Foxchain, which can incentivize this more decentralized, like where does ShapeShift Foundation and AG and Workstream run their stuff?
Right.
Well,
Okay. That's
there would
making
still be 2, right? Because the foundation still would run this. So there would be essentially 2 different instances that are running in segregated fashion.
Yes.
I mean, there could be. It kind of sounds like the suggestion is to just have taxi
No,
stake,
no.
unless
It'd be
No,
better
everyone
if
there would be
has one.
both. There would be 2.
Okay.
There would be the one the foundation runs, and then there would be the one that Taxi Stake runs. Ideally, we would point V2 at Taxi Stake and fill back to the foundation if Taxi Stakes gets blown up for any reason. But yeah, we would be running two endpoints.
And just
I
another
mean, we
thing
could
that-
do that or
Go ahead.
random or by latency
robin.
or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, having the 2 allows us to play a little bit more with what it would look like in the decentralized world. So that's I like that idea, and I'm glad
Technically,
it's not just
yeah,
moving one to somewhere else. And
Is there a reason why we've just defaulted to AWS? I feel like there's a lot of different options out there, many of which are significantly less expensive.
because all of our
Seems like
deploy
we
patterns
just-
are for AWS right now.
yeah, it's what we've
I'll
always
run
used. and
one
that's what
somewhere
we're-
Well,
else.
I know it's what we've always done. It doesn't mean we always
No,
have.
there's
to do
no
it.
reason that we can't have a bounty to create like a cluster launcher for, DigitalOcean or whatever else there might be. That would be cool at some point. There was more priority, obviously, with other
Yeah,
things.
this is what developed organically out of the way that events transpired over the course of the last calendar year.
Another point, just like for on call expectations and stuff. Trying to find the proposal again, but essentially it was like a 3-month contract for $5,000 plus or minus 1,000 in a month or something like that. That's we I think what we were trying to do was aim it at like cost plus 20%. It's there's not a lot in there for overhead, like in time from me and Taxi Stake. Like it was more just like, why would I do this? At least needs to be like 20% or something. And I would love to see it run in not AWS, but that's just it's a relatively small amount is what I'm really trying to say. And if we want to add in a bunch more terms, like I need to think about what I need to support that.
No, it's totally
Yeah,
fine. So it sounds like I just need to indicate that in the proposal, so far what I'm gathering is that I need to indicate that we intend to use Taxi Stake instance as the primary. I need to indicate that Taxi Stake is not responsible for on-call or triage of the Unchained instance, and I need to indicate that that Taxi Stake is basically spooling up the account, providing remote access for infrastructure to be deployed into it.
Yeah, and they're giving full administrative access to the instance to the foundation and the engineering workstream.
Yes.
Sounds great. List of users, TBD, and I need to go reread the proposal again. That sounds great. That what you just said.
Okay, I made some notes accordingly, and we'll update the proposal to that end after this.
Any other questions about the proposal? Cool. Well, good. That's exactly the conversation that I wanted to have happen. Thanks, everyone. Conscious, did you have anything else around it or anything else?
Nope. I appreciate everybody's feedback.
Cool. And on that note, I'm gonna have to jump off for the rest of engineering office hours. I'm on the board of the Community Foundation for Boulder County, a nonprofit here in Colorado. So we've got a board meeting that I need to jump to, and Adam, gonna hand the baton to you. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Thank you, Josh. DeFi here? No.
Nope.
So I'm not sure how many people here are carryovers, but you're in and out, dude.
I'm sorry.
So I was saying, just prior to office hours, we had an architecture hours, and I think we have quite a few carryovers. There, we were talking about Cosmos and Cosmos SDK chains support in our Unchained backend. I was kind of walking through a prototype that I had smashed together that does account and transaction history retrieval for Cosmos and Osmosis. So during that meeting, I talked most of the time and went through source code, and we didn't end up like having time for questions, comments, probing, other than a little bit of interactive. So I guess I'm curious, anyone here would like to continue that conversation?
Yeah, I'd love that if we can.
Do we have Kevin?
Not anymore.
You went with Josh?
We don't have Kevin or Postigos too, though.
Yeah, without either of those, it's probably not a great thing to go on to.
I have another just kind of general question about the engineering workflow. If we're going to transition to a different topic.
Yeah, that should have been my first go-to, really, is who's got topics that's here.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, I don't know if this will take that long. I just was curious about how basically issue and work breakdown, like issues are created and work breakdown occurs. I just wanted to know more about like what the typical process has been for that.
In the DAO, or historically speaking?
Probably the DAO is what I'm more interested in. Just like, you know, now is more important to me than the past, I guess.
So do we have, maybe that's like operation or support is where that would start, I imagine.
I mean, it starts with the product, I guess. So, you know, product puts stuff on a roadmap, and I mean, we make cards during kickoffs for various epics. I mean, is that the sort of level of stuff that you're interested in?
Yeah, I guess in general, like there's a couple of things that I'm trying to figure out. One, I want to try to find more items to bounty. Right now, it seems like that there's a bottleneck just in issues that I can take to bounty, but also just in general want to know more about how we go from basically like a feature on the roadmap to work a developer would actually pick up.
We have caught us post post launch. We haven't had a kickoff for anything yet, so hopefully most of our cards are cleared out and we're just sort of doing spit and polish stuff, which is I don't know. I like it at the moment, but I've been sort of asking this question about security stuff too,
So-
like how you manage security stuff. Which should be part of the engineering workflow and which shouldn't. It's a good topic.
So I guess given that things are so new, the one thing I can point to is, so we have the EM/PM powwow meeting, I think is bi-weekly. So that last batch of things, what ended up being the go live bounty, we actually met in that EM/PM meeting the day before the bounty stuff came up, almost right around the same time. So that was leaders of engineering work stream and product, and we had the roadmap out. I believe it was Chow leading it at that point, and kind of went down our prioritized list of things for the roadmap and picked out the things that we definitely wanted before doing a go live with it, and talked about allocations of engineers that are in the work stream and which of those features, and by features I'm talking about Yearn, talking about getting the WebSocket stuff done and getting Bitcoin live chiefly. There's definitely several more. I have a partial picture of this diagram that Chow had up, or Josh had up. And then from there, like, we normally would have like kickoff and planning. A lot of times starts with like research spikes or a short proof of concept effort or something like that. And then meet again for the kickoff with product, where they'd have some type of, at least semi-detailed requirements, and mock-ups, like UI designs. And we'd go through and have some Q&A and make sure everyone understands what the ask is. And then we'd have, generally either some spikes happen then, or we'd come back together for like a story breakdown kickoff next. And yeah. So we don't have a lot of like, this is what we're doing, because we're kind of figuring it out, but that's probably about how it would go. Because the bounty came at the same time, we kind of just went for it, broke up roughly down the same lines we had outlined ahead of time, and went for it. And yeah, came screaming in with a photo finish as usual.
Got it. Cool. Thanks for the overview.
Anyone else here have a different view of things? Did I miss something? Say anything that needs more explaining?
Do we have plans to do bounties inside some of that scope work, or is that something we should take in pieces? I guess it makes sense for me to do bounties for like bugs and things like that, but inside the like bigger things that we've got going on, where you guys are doing kickoffs and stuff, does that seem like it's more appropriate to be just inside the work stream and not be bountied, or is our goal to eventually have that be like both parts?
So we discussed this stuff a little bit at the retro, and I think we probably have some more discussing to do. So nothing I say is concrete, but I share your perspective, where the engineering work stream is already compensated, planned for type work. So the priorities for the DAO succeeding should be carried out, in that fashion without need for a bounty. So that said, this bounty, that we just wrapped up specifically was a personal one from Eric, not not like a DAO sponsored bounty. So I don't know that we could do anything to stop people with, bank accounts or whatever from incentivizing people to build specific things or build them faster.
I think Tyler's question may be slightly different, which was at least the way that I understood it, Tyler. Maybe I didn't get it, but that we would bounty work that's in like the main work stream path versus bountying just work that's like bug fixes. Was that the question?
Yeah, I think Ocean guided me more, although I'm with you on that statement you made, Adam. But like maybe, for example, if we are going to add Bitcoin to app.shapeshift, is that specifically inside the realm of our roadmap, so only centralized people should be working on that? Or are there bits and pieces of that that would be beneficial for velocity for us to add bounties to? Or is that kind of an ethical quandary of like work streams are assigned to the roadmap and they stick to that and we don't piecemeal that out for anyone but the work stream, I guess is more the question.
Well, there's no reason. I mean, there's no reason centralized people have to do it, especially given that there will be no centralized people after the end of the month. But I mean, if you're talking about work streams specifically, I don't see any reason why something, a task that needs to be done would have to be engineering only, unless there is like context, there that makes it inefficient for engineering to put it out as a ticket with a separate bounty on it. We had a lot of that when we were starting up because we had to copy code over essentially from our old closed source app. But I believe we're mostly through with that. I mean, I haven't checked out Axiom in a couple months, and I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there could be some different perspectives here. I mean, mine would be that anything that we think is bite-sized enough for us to really define the scope on and be able to provide that clear acceptance criteria, that we should really try to bounty as much as we can. I think it's a really powerful tool for us to multiply our velocity of the core team and the core work stream. And also, we will need to scale, obviously, and I think it creates that pipeline. So, I mean, I'm all for us using bounties for both bugs and for new features, and just in the issues where it does make sense for us to do so.
I don't think the bounties has anything to do with the roadmap per se. To me, it has more to do with urgency. So if there are features that are urgently need to get done, it makes sense for a core developer team who's paid and always around to work on that. Whereas things that may be less time sensitive, could be passed off. We ran into this issue with like the HD wallet bounty where it was like, oh, we needed it done in 2 weeks. And like it came to a week and a half and the guy like kept spazzing on us and it was like, crap, now we got to cram it in. So I don't want to end up in that scenario with bounties. So I don't think there's anything wrong with bountying stuff that's on the roadmap as long as it's like, hey, it doesn't really matter if we get it done in 2 weeks or 3 months, or 2 months or whatever the case is. Just understanding that there's going to be different dynamics there when it comes to the bounty work.
And that can be part of the kickoffs for different features or different products. Normally it's been a kind of a closed meeting between engineers, product, and anyone else involved. We can start having these kickoff meetings be more open to the community and actively kind of discussing what parts of the feature spec and product spec could be bountied. We just never really had that approach because we haven't had bounties for any kickoff yet.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said there. For sure that there's a not great meaning of, well, the bounties for time sensitive stuff is not always the best, for sure.
Somebody's got to talk. Awkward pause.
Waiting, trying to force someone to ask question. Got one?
I'm gonna be quiet on this one. I'm gonna let the brains talk right now.
I'll keep poking at this bounty stuff if there's no one else asking stuff. It sounds like there is a bottleneck though in us being able to get a whole bunch of bounties out there, and maybe there are downsides to having a whole bunch of time sensitive things. So would it be beneficial for us to have bounty minded sections of kickoffs so we can have like a container for certain parts that could be isolated or sectioned off from the work, and we can build a much bigger board? Is that something that is actionable right now, or is that something we need to do steps to become actionable on, or is that something we don't want to do?
Well, I think the question here is more of like, do we want to bounty out whole features, or do we want to break features down into tickets and then bounty out specific tickets? And then is it okay to bounty out parts of a feature and not other parts of a feature? I'd kind of like to get this, what other people's sense is on that question first, because I think that'll help answer Tyler's question.
I mean,
Really?
are there concerns with code consistency if you're breaking it down to really smaller pieces, or do we have really good documentation at this point to where we can ensure consistent format and process and stuff? I mean, that would be my only thought, is that if we're going to break it
That's
down in bits and pieces, we got to ensure that it's following some type of format.
Yeah, and that's really a big part of what this boils down to in my mind, is like the stage of like where we're at with the application in its lifetime. It's still in its infancy, I'd say. And so that goes to both the like time sensitive nature and rushing, as that tends to cause things to go slower, sometimes permanently. And we're doing a lot of like groundbreaking, and this is the first time we're doing something like this and don't have the documentation and standards in the place that they would need to be in order to really just to open the doors and go sort of massively parallel on development.
So I will say that we have a little bit of experience with this. It's kind of related. We hired firms to try to parallelize ShapeShift's work. Man, I forget the name of it. But we did it for Watchtower or Anycoin work, and we also did some others. And we ended up not using any of it. Ended up being a lot of wasted work and wasted money and wasted time. And I think a lot of that could be attributed to the size of what we broke apart. But in my mind, we should do whatever works. And I would like to start seeing some retros and feedback. And is it part of our KPI of how many bounties actually succeed versus how many fail? I think that should be part of the workstream's KPI, but I'm not in the workstream, so that's not my decision. But I think it's part of a healthy community measuring how effective our bounty work is.
Yeah, I love the idea of having more metrics around it. And we have stood up some way to measure some of the data that we need from GitHub. Success and failure of bounties may have to be a little bit more manual, but I think that's something we can start reporting on. I know that we have plans to try to present that data during the Monday meetings. So I like that idea also, which is some sort of success rate of the bounties that we do post. And the other point that I'll just respond to is around the size of the bounties. I'm very in favor right now, especially with how the state of the code base and everything else, that the bounties are real small. I think it's helpful to get people onboarded and get them involved, and us to vet contributors as well before we give them bigger chunks of code where they go off for a week and we don't hear from them, and then they come back with something that's a lot of work and we also can't merge it in. I don't think that's the right outcome for anyone.
So I've heard that in the past, the engineering workstream had a lot of unofficial bounties, like you do work, you submit a pull request, and then you get paid. Is that still happening and being planned for the future?
Yeah, I think ultimately our intention would be to compensate contributions where they come from. And if those contributions are made and they didn't happen to be on a magic list of bounty tasks, we should still compensate people for their efforts, commensurate with the value.
Okay.
So yeah, we definitely did some of that in the very early days. If you have specifics, specific person or things you're referring to, I'm happy to talk about that in detail.
Sure. So, I got a bounty earlier today from Gitcoin to get something done, but I'm also working on the README to help make it, to essentially help us onboard new people better, and that hasn't been bountied out. So I figured it would probably be classified as an unofficial bounty and I get paid that way, assuming that people are happy with it. And it sounds like that's the case, right?
Let's just say
Yeah,
two things
I mean,
here.
that sounds
One,
fair.
you can definitely request a bounty. Like, I mean, as silly as it sounds, if you want to create an issue for the README updates and shoot it my way, I'm happy to get a bounty posted for it. So it's quote unquote official. We're still very early in the bounty process. But I think that the overall arching theme of it is what Adam said, which is we want people to feel fairly compensated for their work. We want to attract people that, want to be, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but anyways, so our hope is that people feel like they're, when they're add value, that we also provide value back to them. So, we'll definitely figure it out as we go forward. But again, I would very much welcome contributors sending me issues that they either didn't see a bounty on that they want to work on, or if they create issues that we agree are applicable, we could certainly get a bounty up for them too.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point about the README. I don't see any reason why there can't be bounties for things like improving documentation, best practices, stuff like we have a whole docs repo that barely has anything in it. I would love to see people contribute things, documentation on best practices, setup processes, build processes, whatever the case may be. In fact, those are the things that I don't terribly like to do. So if that means I can pay someone else to do it for me, all the better.
Go,
All right.
oh,
So I do have one question related to that though. So, when submitting code is one thing, submitting documentation is something where I'd say it's a lot more subjective. So I guess the question is, do we want people to submit documentation with the standard pull request model, or should we have some process where people can essentially share what they've posted and sort of have it reviewed beforehand?
Well,
I mean-
all pull requests get reviewed, so that's not a problem.
And it'll have to go through a PR at some point to get, merged in. I mean, unless you're talking about like, the doc website or something. Actually, that's probably based on a repo somewhere too. So that probably has to be PR'd as well.
But that's
Well,
probably
one of the things we talked about was like using Gitbook, which the whole point of this docs repo was that it essentially gets published out through Gitbook so that there is a repo that backs everything up. Some people have been using this like public Notion thing, but that's, as far as my understanding, never really been like an official thing. And I don't like it because it's not backed by a repo. My preference would be for things to go in through our docs repo or docs in an individual repo and have that stuff be published and go through PR review and all that stuff.
Yeah,
As far as feedback for copy editing, and just sort of general, there's no rule that says that, when you make a PR, you're throwing it over the wall and, cross your fingers and hope, right? So, you could always open a draft PR and, solicit feedback on it, or, just that's a very flexible process, I hope.
hmm I think the PR process is probably the most beneficial because it's ensuring that the people that are writing the code, can verify, what's being written up because, the person who's always, might be doing the documentation might not understand, completely what the coder was accomplishing. I mean, or trying to accomplish in the documentation process. So having that PR there will make sure that eyes are on it, and that it's quality write-ups and documentation that's being provided versus just an opinion or something like Seth said. It's very subjective. So I definitely would like to have people on the engineering team being able to verify what's being written is what is actually intended to be out there as representative of the project itself.
Okay. It sounds like going through the PR model is ideal then. So I'll do my best, I'll submit it, and if I get feedback, I'll make modifications, right?
This is a little outside my bailiwick, but I think that personally that issues are best for tracking bounties, and so there should be a PR, but there should also be an associated issue, and you don't have to open the issue before you open the PR if it's inconvenient, right? But that way you can drag cards around and put tags on things and whatever, do the administrative side over on the issue side.
Hey, the other thing I'd throw out there is, like, as you're going, if you have questions, you can ask. Especially, early on, you're kind of one of our guinea pigs here. You don't have to put all the effort in and then go, here it is. If you're unsure about stuff or want some help here or there, we can absolutely make that happen.
Yeah, I've been doing
And
that
Ocean,
today, and I've
for
gotten some great assistance. So I'm definitely not afraid of doing that.
Cool.
Ocean, you were talking about the writing up the bounties, and it seems to me like you could put in an expectation that for these bounties that whoever's working on them is communicating on a daily or weekly basis at stand up, and just kind of set that expectation, because I think that it's important to kind of get that process as a team going, as opposed to, like you said, somebody that just grabs a bounty and 2 weeks later they show up and they have a lot of code, and it might be good code, but it might be hard to merge in, without the communication. Yeah, super good point. On my list of growing things to do is to write some expectation from bounty hunters and some expectations from the ShapeShiftDAO that the bounty hunters can expect as well. So I think your point is right on, and that would be a perfect place to discuss that, right? Which is like basically check in early and often and get feedback. So yeah, I maybe that belongs in the docs repo as well, and it's something that I plan on working on in short order here.
One possible tool to help with that regard could be like milestones. I know that milestones are in a couple places, and GitHub and some other places on the the bug boards and stuff, and we haven't really had the opportunity to utilize them at this point. But some fashion I could see some milestones being built into some of the bounties and stuff to ensure that a certain thing is handled in a proper in a process that is acceptable to what we expect is expectation wise.
Yeah, I think for bigger bounties that could make sense, especially as we get to the bigger ones. For now, I again just trying to keep them as kind of small as we possibly can, but still make it like a meaningful piece of work. Because I think will help us learn and probably be the right fit for where we're at right now with documentation and expectations and stuff. But yeah, I think that if we did have a bigger bounty, that would be a good idea. Put some check marks along the way and have them, open up a work in progress PR, and we could take a look at it before they, get too far down the road.
I know that I don't know what time. Oh, there's only a couple minutes left. Never mind. I won't even ask that question because that was a question that was brought up during the retro, and there was a lot of discussion about it. So I'll let it go. But it just had to do with the engineering team being able to find time to actually participate in bounties themselves, and the whole if that's something that the energy team wants to do or to be able to do and all those things. But obviously we're out of time, so that'll be for another time probably call.
Well, the engineering team is going to have to participate in some bounties because I plan to base the security budget on bounties for contributors from other work streams.
Yep, sounds good.
You saying you're going to pay people to hack the apps we build?
Well, I mean, you can't. If we need people to come in and do something, for security stuff, it's probably going to be unanticipated, and it's probably people that need context from their job in another work stream, like engineering people or ops people or support or whatever. So I think, I may be slightly biased because it's just sort of the role I invented for myself here, where I'm like half engineer and half security person. But I think that's, sort of the optimal scenario where you don't have somebody that's like security dedicated. You have cross-train, essentially. And maybe there's security priorities that might be useful to bounty out. I'm still working through all this, trying to figure out, solidify things so that I get something done before the first of the year. But anyway, so if the engineering people can't take any bounties, then I don't have anybody to work for me.
Yeah, I see. You're not trying to hack our app. You're trying to poach our engineers.
Well, there's
Even
separate
better.
for hacking the app. That's responsible disclosure program. You get an NFT for that.
Cool.
He's looking to hack, poach, and everything else in between.
I got myself a lockpick set for Christmas.
I bought a lockpick set for my son years ago.
And suddenly I remember why we don't dox ourselves.
I thought about, if I just hide the lockpicks like outside under a fake rock or something, I don't have to put a house key there.
I picked one up a few months ago too. Have you actually tried it on your house versus the locks it's included with?
I've not tried it on the house, mostly because it's cold outside and I don't want to crouch out there, trying to get in my own door, which is a little silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least try your neighbors.
Yeah, yeah. That way you don't
ruin it. Folds up, it fits in my pocket, and it is lighter than my car key. Now, I don't know what that says, but the car key gets into one lock. The lockpick set gets into all the locks.
Yeah. Did you buy the bump key as well, or just the?
Oh no, bump keys. This is serious single pin picking. The more elegant weapon from a more civilized age.
Yeah, the kit I bought actually came with two clear locks, so you can actually see what you're doing to try to learn how to do it.
Yep.
I just don't understand why people don't just use sledgehammer.
Yeah, right. That's all.
Well, that's the thing they do. Like no criminals pick locks. Not unless they're super cool.
All I know is the neighborhoods I grew up when I was young, there was no lockpick, and they would just break your shit down and crash it in and go in.
Of course, if you're using a master lock, then they might as well pick your lock because they can do it with like a zip tie or anything. Friends don't let friends use master lock.
It's all about the bump keys, right?
There's DeFi. DeFi, they were looking for you earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry. You guys miss me.
You know, what gets me every time is that your icon looks very like Willie's, you know, when it is